Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Millie. I live in Utah Zone 6/7 and it is mid-November. Now it is getting really late in the day. I've taken a long time doing other projects and I was going to take you along with me while I moved my straw around and mulched my garden beds. But I thought maybe it would be a better thing to do is to go around my yard, talk about mulch, the different kinds of mulches you use, when to put it down and why it's important. So let's go look at the different types of mulches I use in my garden and talk about why they're important. So we're going to start here in my front yard. And this yard, I removed the grass, I think it's been 4.5 years ago now. Next year will be the 5th season without grass. And all the plants are starting to fill in. But before they filled in, I brought in some mulch. And the mulch that I brought in is called compost mulch. Now I've really enjoyed this compost mulch. It is a mulch that's finer than regular bark chips, but it knits together and it kind of forms a barrier over the surface. It breaks down into regular mulch and it doesn't fly away in the wind. So I've absolutely loved the compost mulch for the way it looks. Now I am going to be bringing in some more mulch next spring to cover up my irrigation lines. The irrigation lines have needed to be exposed this year because we had an issue with a breakage in one of the lines when we put in my chat paths here. When they put in the edging around the chat, they actually broke my main line and we ended up having rocks and soil shoved up through my system. So I've been slowly repairing that, getting it working again, and now I think I'm ready to bury the lines. Now because I've waited so long to get these lines buried, there is one thing that is going to work to my benefit. I am absolutely not going to need to use as much mulch because the plants are becoming a living mulch. And actually, plants are one of the best mulches you can use. If you don't mind having a lot of plant cover, then you can use plants as mulch. They cover the soil really well. You know, little tiny ground covers do not stop weeds, but if you have a little bit taller, I'd say 6 inches is the minimum. If you have plants that are 6 inches tall, they are going to stop the weeds. They will choke out weeds. Small ground covers like sedum and thyme are not tall enough to block the sunlight to stop weeds, but living plants can make a wonderful weed barrier. The shade they provide can also hold moisture in the soil, and their roots, I've actually done some research and been reading some of the studies. They're showing that the roots are the best thing that you can have in your soil to build up the microbiome. Now, microbiome, I do believe that fungi is absolutely necessary in the soil, bacteria are necessary in the soil, but I'm not one that believes that you can bring in products that you purchase and build that biome up. I think what you need to do is have mulches, put down the proper kinds of mulch. Stone mulch does not help with building up the microbiome, but all of your organic mulches do. And to have living plant material over the soil and in the soil. Now, another mulch that I really like using, especially here in my food forest, are wood chips. I do need to bring in another layer of wood chips, but wood chips break down slower than the compost mulch does. These have been down for 4 years and it's finally just time to start building up another layer. And they build up the fungi layer in the soil really quickly. Soils absolutely love wood chip mulches. You can put them pretty deep. 6 inches is a good depth. That will block the weeds, it's going to feed the soil, and hold in moisture. Another mulch that I absolutely love is straw. I use a lot of straw in my garden for the same reasons as I use all the other mulches. It blocks the weeds, holds in the moisture, and breaks down and adds good organic matter to the soil. Now, I am going to be mulching all of my garden beds. There are a few that doesn't have mulch in it right now, but I'm going to be mulching all of these in the next few days here. I don't have time to do it today like I was hoping. And all of these garden beds are going to be covered with straw. Here's my straw pile. I use straw to insulate my figs. I bring in new straw every year. That insulates the figs. And then afterwards I put it in a pile to start breaking down over the summer. And then I put them over my garden beds for the winter, and whatever's left over goes into my compost pile to become compost. Now, compost is another excellent mulch. Now, I don't like using it as mulch as much as I like using other materials, because it breaks down. It's like a sponge, and it will actually hold the moisture on the top of the soil. If you think about the way water works, if you have a sponge that's holding the water on the surface of the soil, it is not going to allow that water to be released into the lower layers of the soil until it's completely full. And that's what compost does. So if I try to mulch my beds with compost, what I find is the compost layer stays nice and wet, but the underneath layers does not get water unless I heavily water. So I will mix compost into my soil, but I don't use it as a mulch that often. Another excellent mulch is leaves. Now I am really careful with how I use leaves as a mulch. Leaves that are large, like these, over the winter, especially here in Utah, will form an impenetrable barrier. Because they freeze and thaw, they don't break down very fast. They end up forming a watertight barrier where the water can't get to the soil below. So what I like to do is I rake up all of these leaves, and I either run over them with a lawnmower and stick them in my garden beds, or I just put them whole in my compost piles. And it takes them one season to break down. The reason it only takes one season to break down is because I have a sprinkler head over here. It goes off once every week to 2 weeks. Keeps this area nice and moist, and they break down very quickly. I also mix those leaves in with my garden debris and a little bit of old compost, which is an inoculant. So you don't have to go out and buy compost inoculants. You just use the old compost and just a small sprinkle. And I will probably in a week or two do a video on how I build my compost piles. But these piles were completely full by the end of fall last year. They were full to the fence line, the top of the fence line, of leaves and garden materials. And this is how far they broke down in one season. And this is what the compost looks like in one season. Now, another excellent mulch is grass clippings. Now, normally I am able to time my last lawn mow with the time that I am actually putting my beds to sleep. And I use a lot of grass clippings on my bed. I'll put the grass clippings under the straw, and they end up breaking down because they're in contact with the soil. But this year the timing didn't work out, so the grass clippings did end up in my compost pile, but they'll just be composted down and turn into a wonderful compost that I will use in my garden beds. Now, some people will actually use what's called chop and drop methods. They'll use large leafed plants and they will chop them up and lay them over the top of the soil. I don't do that here in Utah because we are so dry that that plant material does not break down. It just lays down there on the top of the surface of the soil and ends up being a trip hazard for old people like me. So I don't use the chop and drop method as much as I use other mulches like wood chips or straw. Now, I would love to hear your favorite type of mulch. What mulches do you use, and how fast do they break down in your area of the country? My area of the country, because it's so dry and so hot over the summers, the straw takes about 2 years to break down. Grass clippings will take a full season, maybe a season and a half to break down. But that does not stop them from making an excellent mulch and from returning fertility to the soil. So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful gardening adventure.